All right, so today we're going to go over a few games from the Slav list that I finally got out to you guys late this week. So instead of doing the puzzles like normal, we're going to cover some of the games, and next week we're going to plan on doing the tactics. All right. So the first thing I want to show you guys was this game between Awty and Anand, and a really sharp Moran game that was considered one of the best games of 2013. Many places gave it the top nod. And this is Anand himself talking about the game right afterwards. So let's take a look and see what he has here. Now, we couldn't get the speakers to work on the board here, so if you guys can't hear it, sorry, I'll try to paraphrase. Yes, you guys noticed that. So just looking at the position, by the way, he kind of skipped through the opening real fast, just to show you guys what it was. It started like this. So it started out as a semi-Slav, but then white played e3. It went into whoops. Again, the window is too big for you guys. Okay. So if you remember in the lecture about the Slav, I was talking about how bishop b7 and a6 are kind of more popular moves, but this bishop d6 move order is what Anand has been playing. And if you remember, the nice thing about bishop d6 is that now e4, which is a critical move against both a6 and bishop b7, can be met by e5. So black avoids a lot of the complications that are in those lines. So I really like this move order that Anand's done. So just wanted to point that out. So looking at this position, in the Moran, c5 is a huge break for black, because if black gets that in, black will have no bad pieces, right? Bishops on d6 and d7 will point nicely towards the king side, and he'll have a lot of active pieces. So it's essentially a threat. Even if white wins the b5 pawn, it can be worth it to play c5 just to open up all those pieces. Sometimes the pawn isn't really relevant here. So that's why, and I mentioned this move b4, because b4 would be really logical, because now if black doesn't play c5, this bishop on b7 is going to be really bad for a long time. So black's going to have a hard time reaching an equal position. But like Anand said, black can just play c5, as he said was played in the Kazanov-Topalov game. I invite you guys to just look up this move in a database, and you can look at that game on your own. Basically, what ends up happening is a perpetual check. So black can take on f3 and wreck white's king side on the pawn structure on the king side, and then get a perpetual check over there. So it's not really too complicated. He says it's a draw, although black can, if he wishes, also play for win. So basically it's not something white would want to play, because black can draw in the worst case, and in the best case can even play on. So definitely take a look at that on your own, but we're not going to look at it. All right. So he glossed over that really quickly, over white's compensation. So instead of rook c8, mentioned that if black plays e6, white can still play this, and that black can pawn with this queen takes g5 move, right? But he mentions it's not really that great for black. So why do you guys think that is? Why does black have real compensation?
Wait, why does black have compensation for it?
Or sorry, white.
Oh, white.
Now, first of all, bishop h idea, because now black threatens queen h4, right?
Because it can allow the push for e4 with tempo?
That might be possible. As far as I know, f is the most important move, right? And after this knight retreats, we can play b4, and look at that fantastic piece, right? So that's white's compensation here. And white lost this h-pawn in return, which it's not that big a deal, right? Doesn't really control that important of squares, and unless white's getting checkmated, which he's obviously not, it's not going to be an issue. So that's one reason why white has a lot of compensation here. Just that terrible bishop on b7 makes black's life very difficult. He says Boris. Do you know who he's talking about?
Gelfand, right?
Yes, yeah. If you remember in 2013, he played that match with Gelfand. This was after that match, right? Yeah, just by the way, this is probably 1967 is probably already the decisive mistake. Even though if you look it up on the computer, it won't be so obvious. But yeah, in a later game between Wesley So and Samuel Sevion earlier last year in the U.S. Championship, Wesley So took an H7, even though Sevion as black ended up still winning. So for either side, that's an important game for you guys to look at, just theoretically anyway. But if you're analyzing this, you're going to be so far ahead of your opponents, probably you won't even get there. But you know, if you want to analyze this really deeply, that's what you want to look at. He just glosses over that real fast, but let's take a look at what he's talking about. So instead of F4, H3, during Queen H4. So yeah, he just kind of glosses over it. But why can't White say just Rook on F8, just for example?
Oh, bishop takes G2.
Bishop G2 I don't think works. Yeah, Queen H3, right? Threatening mate, and after F3? Not Bishop because you lose the Queen. Knight F2, Queen takes F2.
Wait, so you take.
Yeah, just move the queen, right? And White's in trouble because Bishop G3 is now threatened by Queen H2, but you can't take either here and mate, right? Yeah. Wow, that's a satisfying word to hear. Yeah. All right. So yeah, White would be in serious trouble here, and if you don't take an F8, other moves aren't that great either, right? Like F3, we can still just play something like G3 for the amusing reason that this, right? So White would be in big trouble here. So like he said, H3 wouldn't really be that great. So he said, remember the details. So this is basically preparation that he forgot. So he's trying to remember what he analyzed. So he doesn't really analyze it too much, but let's go back to actual. So first of all, bishop c5, that's a pretty sweet move, right? So when he was talking about it, the problem white has is this threat of queen d4 and the bishop on d3, right? If you play bishop b2, he mentioned queen e2, but if you play bishop b2, then queen d2, because white can't stop mate on g2. There's just no way to defend it. So that's kind of the point behind that move. Pretty sweet. Now bishop b2, and that's knight e5. Another sweet move. So for the same reason, the knight can't be taken, or the bishop, because of this queen d4 knight f2 idea, right? Say you take the bishop, we have, right, queen d4 followed by knight f2, and take the knight, and we have the exact, except even worse, because now we can just, smother mate, right? Right. So the knight's immune, so that's why he took there. All right. So he says just clinches it. So going along. So why does bishop e3 win? So what if just bishop takes e3? Yeah, queen h followed by queen h2 mate, right? So that's just checkmate. Otherwise, white has absolutely no defense to queen takes h3, right? No way white can guard it. Rook f3 doesn't even help. Bishop f3. There's just nothing white can do. So Aronian just gave up. So he's pretty fun to listen to.
Did you look at the computer and what happens if bishop takes a7 opposed to knight takes a7? Is it like even then, or?
Yeah. So if we look at what basic knight takes 7, after knight takes 7, the computer will think it's bad for white, but if you analyze it enough, you'll realize black's pretty much better in all lines, like you were saying. Yeah, bishop h7, the computer actually does like for white, but practically it's very tricky. Like if you look at the So-Stevyan game, So as white got like 4 pawns for a piece, but it's very tricky because black's pieces are very active. So even though the computer, might be able to get a good game, it's actually pretty tricky. So yeah, by the way, did you mention he was talking about if you like your classics, this is pretty similar to Rotlouis versus Rubinstein. So he's talking about Rubinstein's Immortal. So we can take a quick look at that. Rubinstein's Red Salmon Nutrition. Okay, that was interesting. So he was talking about the crossfire of the bishops, and we won't spend too much time, but I just want to show you guys the result. So we have the same deadly crossfire. And then black played the sweet move here. Pretty fun. White pretty much has to take the queen because if bishop takes e3, then bishop takes e4, and then queen h2 mate after, right? But now rook b2. Oh, beautiful. Queen g4, bishop takes e4 would be devastating. So white takes the rook. But now we take. And how does black finish off here? Black to play and win. Got a really pretty move. Yeah, rook h3. Yeah, very pretty. Yeah, rook h2 mate is practically unavoidable. Can't take the bishop on e4 because rook h2, and otherwise nothing to do. You play rook f3, but then just bishop takes f3, then rook h2 is still forced. Yeah, this is what he's talking about, the crossfire of those two bishops on the king side and the knight. Pretty sick. All right, just want to show that real quick. Okay, so yeah, that game is pretty cool. It illustrates a lot of ideas in the Moran. So, as black, basically keep that in mind in the Moran, getting in c5 is just crucial. And the general rule of thumb is if you get it in, you're going to be either equal or better. It's really important pawn break. That means with white too, you're going to want to either stop it or expand in the center before black plays it. Right. Okay. Now we're going to look at an older game between Denker and Botvinnik. Now Denker was at the time, one of the top American players. You might know. Have you guys ever heard of the Denker tournament? It's a tournament where all the high school champions of each state play each other. It's named after this guy, Arnold Denker, right? So he was a pretty important guy, and this was actually not played over the board. This was a radio match. So they told each other their moves over radio. So this was between the Soviet Union and the U.S. back then. Right? Okay. So by the way, if you don't know anything about Botvinnik, he was future world champion. I don't know if he was world champion at the time. Yeah, I think he might have been actually. So anyway. Now, do you guys recall the Botvinnik variation that we were looking at before? Yeah, as you can guess, it bears his name. And he actually, as black, never lost a single game in the line. So yeah, he had a lot of success with this. So black takes on c4. Now, obviously, he played h6. That's the Moscow, something different. But this line is more double-edged. h6 is forced because otherwise we lose the piece, right? And that knight's still pinned, so we have to counterattack the bishop. And now white can take and get rid of the kingside pawns. But now we have this double-edged position where white has this horde of kingside pawns and black has a horde of queenside pawns. So like I was saying last time, if you like complicated positions or you want to win, this would be a great opening for you. But if you don't like dicey situations, you should really avoid this from either side. And already, Anchor made a mistake, and not forgivable considering at the time this wasn't really considered a line for either side. So Nowadays, G3 is easily the main line. You know, the idea is twofold. You want to put a bishop on G2 so that this bishop on B7 doesn't get too powerful when black plays C5. And secondly, you want to blunt this diagonal, which black can attack you, and you'll see why that's important too. B2 is kind of a mistake, although white's not just lost. And yeah, A4 is another mistake because it really just helps black advance those dangerous queenside pawns. You know, as Kasparov analyzes this game, and he mentions probably better would be something like bishop F3 here. Try to make sure that this bishop doesn't destroy the white king side. Now black plays C5. Again, like I said, you know, if you let that happen, you better be careful because black's going to get a lot of activity. And yeah, queen B1 is another kind of passive move. You know, better, as Kasparov mentions too, was probably knight D2. You know, again, leaving open the option for challenging that light square bishop. Part of the problem with queen 1 too is you're locking that rook on A1 out of the game. So queen C7, you know how I mentioned that diagonal was important, right? Already we have a mate threat. So white thinks he's doing okay because now, for tactical reasons, he can get rid of at least one of those dangerous c pawns. So queen C4, rook C1 would pin the queen to the king. So the piece is pretty much taboo. But the tactics don't work out well for me. So first, queen C6, threatening mate on G2. So F3, the only move. And now D3. So black can get this bishop to C5, and that's going to be a big problem for white because the white king is running out of squares. And now white's in really serious trouble. Because black's threatening just simply queen takes G3, and it's hard to suggest what else you do, right? The game you played queen F4, and this doesn't work, but already it's pretty much hopeless. So black to play and win here. What does black do?
Oh, I think you might be right, Dion, because yeah, rook H2 then rook D8, H8.
Okay, so rook H2, king H2, rook H8. Okay.
Oh,
And then queen H4.
oh. Rook takes.
And then rook takes, bishop takes, and then you gotta find the win there because if you do nothing, white got 2 rooks for the queen, right? So it's not exactly decisive. So you gotta find the win after that.
Oh. Oh.
So rook H2, king H2, rook H8, queen H4, rook takes H4, bishop takes H4.
Queen.
Queen where?
F4.
Yep. And why does that win? What if like king H3? Bishop D6. What's your threat?
No, I'm sorry. Oh, you're
Hmm?
thinking.
Yes. H2 goes away, but G2 is not taken. king h3, yeah. So rook h2, king h2, rook h8, queen h4, rook takes h4, bishop takes h4, queen f4, king h3, and then I mean, you got to find a win there because otherwise white just has 2 rooks to the queen. Knight b8 triple exclaim. What? No. You guys are overlooking something pretty simple. I guarantee if you saw the position, you would see it. So.
If the bishop on g5, that's not there.
It's on h4.
It's on h4. It's on h3. It's on f4.
Do you guys want a hint? So queen f4 is actually a fork.
Oh,
Yeah. So you resigned because free pieces.
What was the piece of system?
Free bishop. Yeah, it's a fork. Yeah, you guys were set on mate, so you forgot there's a hanging bishop. I mean, to be fair, 95 would be winning here, because you're threatening knight g6 too. But, the point is you want to attack the hanging bishop, because white can still mate with something like this, right? But the point is that. Yeah. But I mean, the point is you're going to take that bishop and win, though. All right, so any questions on this one? All right. You guys need to work on your visualization. Okay. So the last game we're going to look at was a game between Topalov and Kramnik from 2008. And this was, okay, the board's on the screen. And the Moscow instead of a Botvinnik, and you'll see the difference here. So h6, and then we take the pawn. You seem like a subtle difference, but the point is that after e4, we can play g5 and b5. So unlike the Botvinnik, we don't have this kind of pawn imbalance with white having a bunch of kingside pawns, white having a bunch of queenside pawns. So the difference here is that there's a couple of problems with what black's done. One is that black is way behind the development, right? White already has, 3 pieces developed after, say, bishop b2. All the minor pieces are out, whereas black has all these pieces still in the back rank, right? Second problem is that pawns don't move backwards, so by playing both b5 and g5, black's made a lot of weaknesses. But that being said, black is up a full pawn, so white can't really win that back. So if you're black and you like playing these kind of positions where you're up material and just trying to hold on, you'll like it. Or if you like playing with the initiative and you like having extra development and stuff like that, then you're going to enjoy playing white. So if you know anything about Topalov, he's a really dynamic, sharp player, so he does not mind playing the white side one bit. Right? So bishop b7, and now knight e5. Right? So white is basically eyeing the possibility of playing f4 and opening up that f file. Now Kramnik already made a mistake with this bishop g7 move, although it's not really obvious at the time. Just by the way, for players on the black side and white side, h5 is a critical move that you're going to want to look at now. And in the Grandmaster Rep book with Shandorf, he analyzes this move too. So black is not as lost here. Topalov makes it look kind of easy, but so Kramnik played bishop g7, and now Topalov punished him with a novel. He took on f7 here. And the problem black has here, after he takes the knight, and now knight e4. Now, by the way, bishop h5 is tempting, but it doesn't really accomplish anything since black would just play king e7, and that's where the king wants to go, is away from the king side. So white's not going after checks. But the problem black has in this position is he has 2 bad bishops. This bishop on g7 and this bishop on b7. And white has these wonderful square on b6 for the knight, and this idea of f4 opening the king side, and this weakness on e6, it turns out it's just humongous compensation for the piece. So it's really tricky for black to handle. So king e7, avoiding the fork on e6. And now black guards the bishop, but now bishop g4, and black has some serious problems. White has ideas with queen f3, and for example, say black played rook g8, then white can play queen f3, and then queen e4, and the threat of queen g6 is just killer because it threatens e6 and the bishop, and black really can't do much about it. So this is a really, really dangerous position. So Kramnik chose rook f8 right away. After queen c2, we still have this really deadly threat of queen g6. It's rather hard to stop. And black already has to give material back because with threat of queen e6, then basically mate and the bishop can't defend both. So now white wins 2 pieces and 2 moves in a row, and so at this point white has a really strong attack, as well as a really safe king. So black is going to have some trouble here. A4 is a nice move. The point is that the knight can't be taken because of queen takes d7. Now black's trying to just keep the position closed, maybe intending moves like b2 and knight takes e3, but it's too slow. Now he plays in this nice queen sacrifice, just takes. White has pretty enormous compensation. He got the rook in a piece, and he's also going to get a passed e-pawn. Threatening a5, winning the knight. So black moves out. And now e8, queen is threatened. Black wins one of the e-pawns, but white has backup. Giving bluff. Threatening rook b8 and then mate. So a6. The knight's immune because of the queening on e8. Now the bishop is immune because of the threat of knight c7 and rook b7 mate. And at this point, I think he just gave up. Yeah. And black pretty much has no way to stop either mate or loss of a lot of material here. For example, if queen h3, white can just, and then play knight c7 and rook b7 mates. There's not a whole lot black can do here. The Paul made it look really easy, but the point of this is to show that, in this Moscow line, as black, you got to be really careful in the opening. Make sure you play precisely and avoid positions where white can sacrifice. Going back to the position after knight e5. Whoops. So if you're playing the Moscow as black, whenever white plays the knight e5 move, now you should always be thinking, okay, what happens if white takes an f7? You got to be aware of that sacrifice. And as white, remember too, one of the themes here is you want to move that knight on f3 and play f4 so you can open up the king side. So that's another idea. So any questions on this line in particular? And I sent you guys another example between Nakamura and Anand from 2011 and this line too. Not quite as dramatic because Anand played more precisely as black, but still a nice game. Okay. Well, that was all I had. Thanks, guys.
Quick question. After you were saying the bishop h5 was counting on after the knight sack.
You mean bishop g7?
No, sorry. So next sack.
Oh, you mean after the sack?
Yeah. Bishop h5 is because king would go. And so there's no threat of using queen f3.
Well, queen f3 is certainly the threat, but he can parry it. Yeah, I mean, basically, I guess the point is that the bishop on h5 isn't really doing anything. You'd rather have it on g4 where it attacks e6. And yeah, that kind of drives black away. I mean, keep in mind, you want to try to weave a mating net, and that may involve or not involve actually checking, right?